Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarai. Amen. Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you for jumping in with us and joining us as we jump into a brand new lesson. So Torah Yud Tes, B'siyata D'Shmaya, the write-up of Torah Yud Ches is in progress, and hopefully we'll be finished at some point today, and we'll send that out. And here we are beginning Torah Yud Tes. Today's shir is graciously sponsored by Rabbi Bernard Bolag and dedicated L'ilui Nishmas his dear mother, Sarah Deborah Chaya Bas Yehושע, and L'ilui Nishmas Miriam Bas Yehושע and Yehושע ben Abraham Yehuda. Yehושע ben Abraham Yehuda? Is that the right name? Yeah. Yehושע ben Abraham Yehuda, neshama ben Aliyah, as well as sponsored by Deborah Jacobi in honor of her beloved father Aryeh Leib and Shlomo, of blessed memory, his neshama ben Aliyah, Be'ezras Hashem, in the schus of our learning together this morning. Thank you very much for the sponsorship. Okay, so we jump in to Torah Yud Tes. Before we do, we take a look at the preceding paragraph where Reb Nassan sort of closes off the previous section of the last three lessons, which were the lessons of the Mishta'eh, of these recountings of the Tanaim who are traveling by boat that are brought in the Gemara after the Torahs of Rabbi Bar Chana. And here he closes it off very poetically, and he introduces the next segment, which, like I mentioned, is the last segment, which will culminate in Torah Chaf Beis, and then it's out into the open waters. The whole thing is water, right? The whole thing is ocean. You know, we're also traveling by a boat. These are interesting things we're seeing by boat. these Torahs, as we travel through life, and we're going to be out in the open sea, into the Yam HaTalmud, into the Yam of Tanakh, and it's really. Oh, actually, no, scratch that. I'm sorry. No, after that is the Sabi de Batuna. I'm sorry. And that goes until, hold on a second, that goes until, more fish, right, exactly. That goes until Torah, I'm not even sure. Okay, I'll have to look through it again. But then at a certain point, it's just sort of Torahs. Okay, we'll have to take a look at it. It's beyond 22. No, 22 is where the next segment begins. Okay, we'll see it when we get there. Okay, but this lesson begins with the teachings of Sefer Ditzniusa, and Reb Nassan introduces it with the following: Adheina azaruna rachamecha. Hashem has guided us in His compassionate way and helped us l'sayim maimrei hamishtae, to complete the mamarim and the understandings of these deep visions of the tzaddikim who recounted their experiences, and those are called the Mishta'es. Asher histiru behem ginzaya de malka, kulu tanoi v'kula amarai. That within these stories were hidden all the secrets of the king, and were hidden by all the tanaim and all the amiraim. Kanat sisu l'mili denafkim hadrasa. Now listen carefully to words that emerge from hadrasa, from a place of glory. Shvar alei lechavuye ba'ape malkavasa. Words that are fitting to be spoken before royalty. With wisdom, we will reveal to you a little bit to make you to educate us and to make us known, or to allow us to know what's held within the following teachings. Gedulas habayre, the awesome wonders of the Creator, Gnizan Ilayin, elevated secrets, Hatzfunim, that are hidden, B'sifra Ditzniusa, in the modest book, the book of modesty, the book of hiddenness, the Sefer Ditzniusa. Asya v'simaya, the Avad Iman Elakadeshmaya, these wonderful wonders, awesome wonders that the God of heaven has done for us, Legalis Lana, to reveal to us Atan de Oraisa, the Eitzos that emerge from the Torah that teach us how to come close to Hashem, v'derech nifla v'noira, in an awesome and wondrous way. And it really is truly awesome and wondrous, this teaching and the teachings that precede, or that we will proceed to explore, B'ezras Hashem, v'derech nifla v'noira, in an awesome and wondrous way, that is also Hashav l'chol nefesh, like Rabbi Nachman's teachings that are the deepest of the deep, philosophically and mystically, but also relate to each and every individual to teach us how to come closer to Hashem. Liskais, to merit lehiskari val yadam, to merit by way of them ledivra koila lame'avad le'ru'usa, to be able to come close to the one who created all and to do his will. Brich shmei le'ela, may his name be praised above min kol birchasa v'shirasa, above and beyond all blessing and all song. And with this we begin Torah Yates. Torah Yates is actually a teaching that was revealed on Shavuos. And so, of course, the whole Torah is going to be suffused with the energy of Shavuos. It's not stam that he chose to reveal this lesson then. And it's particularly apropos for us, so just a few short weeks away from Shavuos as we approach and prepare. So let's keep that in mind, Be'ezus Hashem, and try to listen out for that. And the teaching, as we're going to see, is a difficult one. It's not Lashon Rabbeinu, which ordinarily means that it's written by Reb Nosson, which usually means that they're a little bit easier to learn, easier to understand. That's not so much the case with this teaching. It's very terse, it's a ton of material, and it's new, and it's deep, and it requires a lot of thought, and it's also very lengthy. So we're going to probably be with Torah Yates for a while. And Hashem shall bless us with Siyata D'Shmaya, Be'ezus Hashem. The Rebbe goes on the pasuk Tfilu l'Chabakuk, the prayer of Chabakuk Hanavi al Shigyonos v'chula, as we're going to see later on in the end of the Torah, where we're going to get back to these psukim. But ultimately, the next the next three teachings, right? No, the next four teachings are on the 5 prakim of Sefer Ditzniusa. Each teaching treats a different perek, and then the last perek. Let me just see if I remember. Or maybe, one of them in the middle is 2 of the prakim, yeah. Torah Chaf covers 2. Covers the second and the third. Yeah, so the next 4 teachings treat all 5 prakim of Sefer Ditzniusa, which, like I mentioned yesterday, are a portion of the Zohar Kadosh and Parshas Truma. 5 chapters, it's very deep. Why 5? It's Keneged the Partsufim, the whole of Sefer Ditzniusa begins to reveal the concept of the Olam HaTikun. It deals with the Shviras HaKelim, and then it talks about how things were brought into Tikun. And so it's the most potent, in a certain sense, part of the Zohar that treats the creation of evil and its rectification. And it's a very, very, very lofty portion of the Zohar, extraordinarily mystical, and it has many famous commentaries. The Vilna Gaon, Kiyadua, wrote a very famous commentary, maybe Rav Chaim Volozhin's Hakdama to the Gross Pirush and Sefer Ditzniusa is maybe even more famous than the Pirush itself. But the Vilna Gaon has a remarkable Pirush, which I'm zocheh to have at home, and I've learned a bit of. And it's just tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous. Rabbi Nachman is going to he's not explaining the whole of it, even though it's not very long. It's 5 short prakim, and it's very terse and a lot of also information packed in. The Rebbe takes each perek and sort of reveals the energy of it through certain very lofty and hidden sugyas, as we're going to see together. So, B'Shem Hashem, Nasa v'Natzliach, and let's set out on our journey. Isa b'Sefer Ditzniusa. It's brought in the Sefer Ditzniusa, also called Sefer Ditzniusa, Pirka Kadma'a, in the first chapter. And this is how it begins. Ad lahava maskala, until there was balance, gesundheit. Ad lahava maskala, until there was the maskala, which is maybe the most important word in the whole Zohar and the whole Yiddishkeit. Maskala, balance. La hava mashgichen apen ba'apen. Things were not aligned face to face. Until there was alignment between the different spheros. So prior to Tikkun, there was Shviras HaKelim, which means that every energy operated on its own without any integration with the other energies. And each one, so to speak, turned its back on the others. And each one said, Ana Emleich, I will be the king, right? Like in the end of Parshas Vayishlach, right? Misas Malachim, where it goes through all the kings of Edom, which the Arizal tells us is all about Shviras HaKelim, right? Based on the Zohar. Why were they kings? They could have been any people who died, and then someone else inherited their position as, whatever it was. Why are they kings? because this was their issue. Each one said, Ana Emlech, I want to be the king. And they didn't realize that they were only cogs in a much larger machine. And they didn't integrate, they didn't operate one with the other, something similar to Migdal Bavel, right? Where there was all of a sudden, and we're going to learn about that, they couldn't speak the same language and everything developed. Because there's no coordination. When there's coordination, everything changes. And in order for there to be coordination, there needs to be the sod, the secret of the maskala. What's the secret of the maskala? So like we explained in the 5th shiur in the series, when we went through a little bit of a hakdama to the spheros, the whole system of the spheros is built on a system of dialectic, where you begin with one energy, it's balanced, right, or contrasted by the opposing energy, the opposite energy, and then they come together in the middle. The middle kav, also called the kav emtsai, is what's called the maskala. We're emerging from the realm of keser, which first emerges as a center energy, right? Because keser just sits above. Again, conceptually, there's no physical space, but theoretically, keser is in the middle, and then from keser emerges chachma, and then bina. But they all realize, chachma and bina, that they're only part of a bigger whole. And they are then really, Bina is able to produce a whole other system of centered energies. So we have Chesed, and then all the way on the other side we have Gvura, and then the Maskala is where they realize Chesed and Gvura in and of themselves that they are energetically inadequate, right? They are not enough on their own. But if they contribute their energies one to the other, that produces Tiferes. That's the Maskala. You understand? And so the lack of Maskala is Shviras HaKelim. Because Chesed thinks that Ana Emlech, Chesed, right? The whole world is only going to be run through Chesed. It doesn't work that way. It's like parents trying to raise their children without any boundaries and any gvura. It will mess the kids up just as much as if they try to raise the kids without any love. Everybody speaks about raising kids with love, but people don't also speak, so much about raising children with boundaries. And sometimes, if a child experiences too much boundaries as a kid, they can go to the opposite extreme and do just as much harm. So because the secret is balance. If you only have chesed, the whole system is mikukal. If you only have gevura, certainly, the whole system is mikukal. It's not going to function. Maskala means that chesed and gevura realize they're all in this together. That produces the balance of tiferes. And that's how the whole system is able to emerge and unfold and evolve in a way of health.
So it's okay then when there's chesed and gevura, but tiferes wasn't yet created, etc.
That's right. There's no middle. Okay? No. Let's say Tiferes is created. Now, there still is the energy of Tiferes, but it's not. It itself is functioning alone, right? The spheres are released as dots. They're released as nekudas, right? But they're not akud. They're not bound together. Okay. They're not functioning one. Each one in and of themselves. So even though Tiferes happens, so to speak, happens to be in the middle, but if it's devoid of netzach and hoyd and chesed and gvura and yisoid and it's not fine. It's like one part of a person's body, right? Even if it happens to be the stomach, you can't have just a stomach walking around you. It has to have. It can't walk. It needs to have legs and hands and etc. So then you have the whole thing. This is called the partsufim, when the spheres join together to form personas, so to speak, that are larger than the sum of the parts. Right, where they come together, and when it's all together, this is a person, this is I don't just see a hand, that's called the maskala. And then chesed and gvura are apin ba'apin. They're face to face, and that produces a system that works. And that's what we're going to come back to explain. You hear the Rebbe begins, Torah Yudtes, Ois Aleph. Ki kasha la'olam. The world has the following question. And this was, of course, more relevant when Rabbi Nachman was alive. Now he's not alive, and now he put himself completely in his sefarim. But certainly when the tzaddik was alive, and there are certainly tzaddikim still today, that there's a special benefit to going to a tzaddik to hear the words of the tzaddik. Rav Nosson makes big asek out of this in Likutei Halachos as well, from the standpoint something a little bit different than what we're going to learn here. But Rav Nosson makes it clear that there's more to communication than words, right? Because there are hand motions, right? Especially me, I'm big with my hands, and there are facial expressions, and there's body language. There's so much more that's communicated than just in words. And if you just read out of a book, you miss all of the context. You miss And so Rav Nosson speaks about that based on Rabbi Nachman's teaching later on in Likutei Moharan, maybe Torah Zion and Tanyan, I can't remember right now, about the Ramazim, there are Ramazim. But over here, Rabbi Nachman takes a different approach, which we're going to get back to all the way in the end. But he says, why is it that people have a hard time traveling to tzaddikim to hear Torah from them? They say to themselves, Halai efshel ayim b'sfarim divrei musar. We can read in the Svarim, Deborah Musar. This was before the quote-unquote Musar movement. So Hasidus was Musar. Right? They didn't. This was. What does Musar mean? Musar just means guidance, So because the Baal Shem Tov came quite a bit before Musar, right? Rabbi Yisrael Salanter and so on and so Navardik and that whole movement. And so this is Musar. Rabbi Nachman says you could read Likutei Moharan, you could read Musar, but the Rebbe says no. Ach be'emes hu te'eles gadol. There's a huge difference. And again, if we believe that Rabbi Nachman was the last tzaddik emes, it makes this particular teaching a little bit problematic, because where are you supposed to go? And you can't hear him speak. But I'll call upon him to hear maybe anybody giving it over, as we're going to see. But whatever it is, there's a huge distinction between hearing it from the mouth of the tzaddik emes himself, to hear it not, right? Or to hear it from someone else who's even saying it over in his name. If you heard it third hand, right, from someone who heard it, from the tzaddik. Because it goes down each time from level to level, and it's distant from the mouth of the one who taught it, which teaches a very important thing about the way in which it's impossible to learn these teachings divorced from the tzaddik as a person. Sometimes if people take Likutei Moharan and they think that's a wondrous sefer, but they'll never mention the name Rabbi Nachman, and there are people like this, and they'll just learn it in a vacuum. It's one of the Hasidic Svarim, and maybe it's better not to mention who said it because, of all the opposition and all the stuff about Breslov. And it's a chaval, because the Rebbe is so much a huge part of his teaching. His teaching is him. His energy suffuses the sefer. You build a relationship with the tzaddik. How could you just learn the Torah without connecting to the tzaddik? So the Rebbe makes that clear over here. Rachak mipiyat tzaddik. It becomes distant from the mouth of the tzaddik. V'chein ben hashemia mipiyat tzaddik lama'ayim b'sefer. He says, hu chiluk gadol b'yoser. And to just sort of learn the Torah out of a sefer is even more distant. Okay, we're going to get back to that all the way at the end. Now here the Rebbe really launches into it. Ois beis. The Rebbe says it's important for a person to refine their face. What does it mean to refine our face? To cleanse our face, to refine our face? He says, "Sheyucha kol echad liras panav bepanim shaloi kamay b'mara." That our face should be so shining and should be so cleansed and refined that when someone else looks at us, he sees themselves like a mirror. What does he mean like a mirror? Not that a person's face is like buffed, like mamish, like a floor that's buffered and shining, that a person literally sees themselves reflected, if such a thing is possible, probably not. He doesn't mean that. He says, metaphorically, if a person's on such a high madrega, that immediately when a person comes into contact with you, they immediately want to do tshuva. Just by looking at your holy face. Am I seeing a person who is living on a level where even without having to give anybody musar, just by, like they say, a walking musar sefer, just by coming into contact with this person, not that the person feels bad about themselves, but a person could aspire to so much greater than where they're at, and you don't even have to say anything to them. You just, sometimes a person comes into contact with a holy person, you feel it. Not that the tzaddik needs to give you any musar. Just by looking into the face of a holy person, of a person who's mamish aligned with Ratzon Hashem, a shining Jew. Just by looking into this person's face, again, he's not obviously seeing himself, but like a mirror reflects to a person self-awareness, enables a person to understand who he is and where he's at and where he should go. Looking in the face of the tzaddik will cause this person to reflect on their own life. and to reflect on where they're at and what they're missing and how they can improve. Where in relative terms, look at this person and how he lives or she lives, and look at me and how I live.
So to clarify the word,
yeah.
It's at the beginning of this line. Means shaloi means of the tzaddik.
Yeah.
So he's talking now to another guy, and he's saying, when you look into the face of a tzaddik, you should be able to look at the tzaddik like a mirror.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, he's not. Yeah, he's saying just generally. Every Jew needs to try to rectify their face, so that everyone who comes into contact with whichever Jew will see himself reflected in that Jew's face. He doesn't say ki atatzar, he says a more general statement.
Whose face I'm saying, we were talking about the tzaddik a moment ago, that's why I'm wondering, does he mean looking in the face of a tzaddik?
Every single person is supposed to be a tzaddik. That's what Rabbi Nachman wants. Yeah, this is for all of us. This is not, it's definitely true about tzaddikim, and all of us have experienced that probably if you come into the contact with a real tzaddik, that you feel mamish humbled in front of. He doesn't need to give musar. You walk out and he's, Chaim Kanievsky was a musar sefer. You see a person who's shining from one end of the world to the other. You go to Rav Meyer and you sit with him for 2 minutes. There's a person he's been at Kaddish V'Tar since he's a child. He's mamish like on the highest level. So you feel it. And others. I'm just throwing out names. There are many, many others. Yeah. Okay? So let's go weiter. So Eis Gimel. And here he really begins. Okay. Buckle up. Ki goydel yikar ha'erech shalashon ha'kodesh. He says we need to understand the extraordinary preciousness and value of this language of Lashon HaKodesh. Shabbai nivra olam, because the whole world was created with it. And this is going to be a direct extension of what we just learned in Torah Yud Ches, about the letters, and Avanim Shlevois Tivna, and the whole world being created with the letters that need completion with Olam Haba. This is a direct continuation. K'maimer Chachamim is Chana Levracha. Chazal teach us lezois yikare isha kimi ishlu kachazois. Chava was called Isha. Why was she called Isha? Because Isha is a derivative of Ish, and Chava was a derivative of Adam because she was taken from a tzela, from a rib. Says Rashi, Lashon Neifel al Lashon. Lashon Neifel al Lashon is a way of saying, it literally means a language falls upon a language, right? But that's not what Rashi means. Rashi is telling us Lashon Neifel al Lashon is that these two words are right. The word Isha falls upon Ish, meaning it relies on the word Ish. It's a derivative from Ish. And that's how Rashi expresses that from Chazal. Lashon Neifel al Lashon. Chava is called Isha because Adam is called Ish. From here you see that the whole world was created with Lashon HaKodesh. Why the whole world? What about Chava? Chava is a person. Why now do you know that the whole world was created with Lashon HaKodesh? Because Chava isn't just a person. Chava is the sphera of Malchus. Because as the first feminine energy that emerges into the world, she becomes the symbol for the ultimate feminine energy, which is Malchus, which is literally the creation of the world in and of itself, which is a realm of receptivity where the world can't give anything before it is given everything. Then the world can give back. But the world is ultimately created, and it didn't do anything to earn having been created. It is Malchus de l'Islamagar me klum. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world with chesed, mamish chesed, from mitchila vad sof. This whole world is just a kli. It is a beneficiary of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energies that flow down through all the spheres until they come down to this place of Malchus, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu literally created it with Yehi. Vayomer Elokim Yehi, Yehi Rekia, Yehi Ar, Yehi, and so on. Not in that order. Yehi Ar, Yehi Rekia, and all the other things that were created throughout the Sheishis Me'Bereshis are created with Lashon HaKodesh. And Chava, as the first expression, manifestation of the feminine aspect of Tzelem Elokim, as the Shechina, as the Ein Kol Chai, she embodies the aspect of Malchus. And we know from the Zohar Kadosh that Malchus Peh, Malchus is associated with the mouth of a person, because if a person takes speech and unfolds all of its elements, you recognize that it first begins with breath. It's deep, deep, deep inside. And then once the breath is held inside, The Baal HaTanya quotes the Zohar Kodesh that doesn't exist, unfortunately, in any other edition of the Zohar Kodesh outside of the Baal HaTanyas, which is very bizarre. But the Baal HaTanya quotes the Zohar Kodesh that nobody else can find, that says that man de nafach mitoiche nafach. The one who, and maybe it's not a Zohar Kodesh, but he quotes it in the name of the Zohar, that a person who blows from deep inside of themselves. They first took a deep breath, mamish, into the belly, into the tiferes, right, of the person, into the yudke vavke, into the trunk of the tree before the branches of the whole body, into like the Shari Ur explains, right, in the first showers. It's all here, right, the center. That's why the umbilical cord comes in the middle and not from the mind, etc., etc. But he blows deep inside of the belly, and then the breath comes up. So the breath in this context is the higher spheres, right? It's ethereal. It's that which is the primordial aspect of the beginning of the creative process. Then it comes through the kol, through voice, which is tiferes, because it says about Yaakov Avinu, who's tiferes, because Abraham is the right hand, Yitzchak is the left hand, Yaakov Avinu is tiferes. It says about Yaakov Avinu, hakol kol Yaakov. So voice is the bechina of tiferes, kutsha brichu. And on that level, godliness is still transcendent and infinite, and it hasn't yet been mitzumtzam. It hasn't yet been constricted into particular aspects. It's still, malleable. And then we project that voice into the klei hadibor, malchus, which is a vessel. The mouth is a kli. No other part of the body that's a vessel like that. Right? It's a kli. Really, it's facing this way. Right? Because if it's closed, then it's a kli. It's open through the throat. The voice comes into the kli. And then we use the 5 chelkei hadibor to enunciate and to utilize that voice to produce any number of words in any number of languages. And once we speak a word, that word is already spoken, and the word spoken and the voice that was channeled into the word spoken, I'm using that word, cannot be any other word now. Speech.
Recording stopped.
Speech, it's okay, it's fine. Speech defines. Speech defines. And that's what Malchus is. Malchus takes all of the energies and it locks them into their final form that can be experienced. It takes all the front end code, which is still very ethereal, or the back end code rather, and it transforms it into a front end experience where nothing can be changed fundamentally. In the code it can be changed. In the voice, that sound can be any sound in the whole, can be any word in the whole world. In any language, you take that measure of voice and put it into a Chinese voice box, and they're speaking Chinese with it. And put it into a Japanese, and they're speaking Japanese. And there's Chinese and Russian and Ukrainian and everything else. They can. Voice is transcendent. Hakol kol Yaakov. Dibor is the bechina of David HaMelech. Va'ani tefila. David HaMelech's whole thing is dibor, dibor, dibor. Yaakov Avinu is more kol oriented, more emotive. David HaMelech is speech. Va'ani tefila. He is prayer. He is dibor. This is the side, David HaMelech. B'diuk. David HaMelech is Malchus. That's right. And this is the side, just not to get too much into it, but just for the shleimus of the inyan, and it's important hakdama, as you're going to see. This relates to the Berditchever Rav, has a very beautiful teaching in his drushes to Rosh Hashanah. It begins with the Dibra Maschal Benusach. And he writes over there that there's a stira in Chazals. One Chazal says that Klal Yisrael are judged on Rosh Hashanah for the whole year, and another Chazal say that Klal Yisrael are judged every day. Every day a person is judged. So which one is it? Are we judged in the beginning and then the whole year is set in stone? Or are we judged every day? In which case, what do we need? What's the big inyan of Rosh Hashanah? Is the Yom Adin. Why do we need that? We're judged anyway every day. Says the Berditchever, there are 2 bechinas. Number 1 is the judgment, how much is going to happen to you this year from the standpoint of creative energy and godliness that's going to come down in your life and be apportionate, right? Be ready to be apportioned. And then there's the form that chiyas takes every day. It's like there's a degree of clay, right? And that's how much clay you have. Now, what it's going to turn into That's every day. It can either be l'tov, it could be chas v'shalom l'mutav, and we channel that based on our actions, based on the way that we're living, the way that we're going to experience the shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rosh Hashanah is about quantity, and each and every day is about the quality that quantity takes. Memela, says the B'ditchver, how beautiful that on Rosh Hashanah the whole Inyan is blowing the shofar. What's shofar? Is kol b'loi dibur. Because Rosh Hashanah is about bringing down the shefa in and of itself without it being mitzumtzam in particular vessels. That's every day, where we daven 3 times a day, and we use words, and the B'ditchver says, based on the words that we use and how we talk, which is reflective of how we think, which is reflected in how we act, those are the letters that the shefa is going to be mitzamtzim itself down into. But ultimately, it begins with the shofar, which is just pure kol b'lei dibur, just kutchabrichu without shchinte, just Yaakov Avinu without David HaMelech, just shefa without it being mitzumtzam. Bring it back now to Chava, where Chava is the embodiment, even though David HaMelech also, in a different bechina, but Chava is the embodiment of Malchus. So much so, that Rabbi Nachman says that the very word Chava means to speak. V'zeh bechinas Chava. Bebechinas v'layla l'layla yechaveh da'as. Yom l'yom yabi'a omer, days converse one with the other. V'layla l'layla yechaveh da'as. And the nights exchange wisdom also through communication. Yechaveh means to speak. This is the holy language of Lashon HaKodesh. That Lashon HaKodesh is a world that was created with purpose. Because if a person doesn't believe that the world was created with Deborah, then the world is not communicating anything. Communication is meaning. Communication means that a person is trying to express an idea, trying to express something, usually for some purpose of utility or to accomplish something. This is the deep meaning of what it means. Bereshis bara Elikim Shemamas, v'aretz hasayva v'choshecha b'nei v'yomer Elikim yihi ar v'yihi ar. That if you read the Psukim al Pi Rashi, everything is leading up to v'yihi ar. There's an issue. Bereshis doesn't mean in the beginning, but Bereshis bara Elikim, in the beginning of God's creating. Right? That's how you translate it. Take a look in Rashi. Most people translate in the beginning God created. It's not how you read it. The Rashi proves that at length. And if you read it like Rashi, an incredible thing emerges. Because now, it's not, Bereshis bara Elikim is like the central idea, right? Because that would be a pretty central idea if you read it that way. Pasuk, and maybe of the whole parak, and maybe of the whole sefer, Bereshis, maybe of the whole Torah. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Unbelievable, right? I mean, you understand, if you read the words that way, then that pasuk is the centerpiece of the whole narrative. And then you can tell me, what was in the earth? But if you read it like Rashi, listen to where the emphasis is, and it changes everything. Most people miss this. I learned this together with Yoni, right? Yoni, remember? I learned this with Yoni Shine, who's on the Zoom. He's not actually in the room. People are looking around. Yoni, we do have a strong connection, but he's on the Zoom. I can see him. So we learned together that Rashi says this. Bereshis bara Elikim ha'aretz, in the beginning of God's having created heaven and earth. So it's like opening up a narrative. So then everything was dark. And so far you haven't told me anything yet. You're just opening up this. You're letting me know. So you know what the centerpiece is? Vayomer Elikim yihi ar. Everything changes. And God said, let there be light. If you read, you hear the depth. If you read the psukim like Rashi, the energy shifts from Bereshis bara Elikim es hashamayim es haaretz to, that's just sort of like you're setting up the context. Bereshis bara Elikim es hashamayim es haaretz. Oh, vayomer Elikim yihi ar. Chazal are teaching us that the essence of creation is light. Sure, God created heaven and earth. For what purpose? Yihi ar. If a person lives in a world that wasn't created with Vayomer Elikim Yihi, the world is a place of meaninglessness. It might be lashon, but it's not lashon hakodesh, because it's not something that's able to transmit and channel and reveal spiritual energy from beyond. It's just stuck in what it is, and it becomes a realm that's meaningless and that's impotent. It's not able to produce anything, because kodesh means transcendent. Lashon hakodesh isn't just meaningless stuttering. It's lashon that is gesundheit. It's lashon that's transmitting kodesh. You understand? It's speech that is so pregnant and potent and full of meaning that it's a receptacle for kedusha. It's bringing thoughts that otherwise could never be communicated because they're just stuck in here and you can't even feel them. You could see a person's brain, maybe imaging, but like we haven't yet found a way to be able to, telepathetically, just read someone's brain. They're very, very transcendent, very lofty. Thoughts are very removed. Lashon HaKodesh, and you're going to understand in a minute why I'm setting it up in this way. Lashon HaKodesh is speech that's able to draw down something holy. Something similar to birth. Where in a zivuk of husband and wife, of Tiferes Malchus, which is the way that it's supposed to be, that has the capacity to draw down neshamas kedoshas from a place of holiness. Children who have meaning. Otherwise, chas v'shalom, in a case of niyaf, or in a case of quasi-niyaf, right, where it's not adultery with chas v'shalom with someone else, but when there's no isha, you understand, when there's no receptacle, it produces a form of mamzerim, or neshamas artilais, souls that are born without a body, that just go into the klipa, that are just floating around, that don't have a way to show up in the world and participate fully. Like the halachas about a mamzer. You hear how deep this is, right? Because what's the inyan of a mamzer? It's not their fault. It's a big tikkun, to be a mamzer. It's a very, very big tikkun, because it's a very difficult experience. You can imagine. What's the inyan? The inyan is that if it's not coming out of a place of kedusha, it might be lashon, meaning its expressivity. There's the expression of something in the world, but there's a certain degree of kedusha that wasn't imparted. Because speech is all about imparting and communicating and revealing ligalo, right? To be megale kedusha. Hainu bechinas hadibor shel lashon hakodesh. This is the creation of the world with lashon hakodesh. Vayomer likim. Only then can you have vayhi'ar. Then you live in a world of Torah Aleph. Right? Then you live in a world of Yaakov Avinu. Then you live in a world of seeing the Chachma, the Seichel, Sheish B'chol Davar, and seeing the Tiferes of Torah Yud Zayin, and seeing the Avodim Shlemis Tivna of Torah Yud Ches. Right? Living in a world that's lichtig. Living in a world of the Tzaddik. Shabai Nivra Olam, with which the world was created. And that's why it says, L'zois Yikari Isha. This is why she is called an Isha, L'zois. That word is used specifically because the word Zois is always a reference to Malchus, because Zeh is how you refer to a male, right? Something that's male, right? Zeh means this, but it's the male sense. And Zot is how you say this in feminine. So Zot is, again, an expression of the feminine energy, and it's the Bechina of Malchus. L'zois Yikare Isha. For this she is called Isha, Hainu Adibur. And this is a reference to Chava Yom Liyom Abia Emer B'Layla L'Layla Yechabe Da'asa B'Chin of Malchus Kamai V'Zois Asher Diber Lahem. Like the pasuk says, and this is what you shall Diber Lahem, should speak to them. So you see again that Zot, Malchus, is connected to Dibor, Zot is connected to Chava, Chava itself is Dibor. All of this is the creation of the world.
Why is Dibor in bold?
Why is?
Dibor in bold.
Where is Dibor in bold?
Sorry, Yikare.
Yikare, because it's a reference to speech. Right, L'zois Yikare Isha, right? By Yikra is to call out, is to communicate to, right? So over here we're seeing L'zois Yikare in the context of Chava, whose very name means speech, and then you're seeing V'zois Asher Diber Lahem, another pasuk where Zos, the feminine tense, is connected to the concept of speech because it's all the aspect of Malchus.
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
According to the way you're explaining Bereshis that's built up to Vayior, we also know the Chazal that Bereshis Nami Have a Maimer.
Yeah.
So it was also a Dibor, but yet we sort of ignore it. It's exactly as we lay there, we kind of go, Bereshis, and then like all builds up to like the Vayhi Or. But like, what do we do with Bereshis?
Because you know why? Because the only way to recognize Bereshis Nami Maimer is through the lens of Vayhi Or.
It has to come.
Yeah. Because the whole thing is dormant, right? What's the Indian? Bereshis Bara Lekim is that the essence of creation, that it emerged from the Ein Sof, is hidden legamre. Mm-hmm. Only people who are connected to Vayomer Lekim Yehi Ar, then you can look back and say, okay, not only is HaKadosh Baruch Hu lichtig, but everything emerged from him. But the Maimer Sasam is connected to Keser. Right, the Asar Mamaris with our not 10, our 9. The first Maimer is Bereshis. Mamela is Keser. What do we learn about Keser in Torah Vav? It's hidden. Kisa de Miskasia. Keser is hidden. Mamela, the Maimer Sasam, has to be hidden because it relates to the motivation that caused God to want to create the world and say by Ar, and we have no idea what that really is. It's a mystery. It has to remain a mystery, etc. More to say on that, but that's for a different time. Okay, this is the fundamental way that Klal Yisrael, again, we have to preserve our particularity, is lifted up above all the other nations that are referred to with the word Lashonos, right? We were lifted above all other languages, which means that our language, Lashon HaKodesh, but not just the language that we speak, which is so reflective of our national spirit, as communication is. Language is so important. But it means the way that we approach the world. We approach the world as Lashon HaKodesh. We find the letters of the Aleph Beis everywhere we look. We find the Kadosh Baruch Hu's messages to us everywhere we look, and therefore our experience of the world is a potent experience. It's a fruitful experience of living in this world, right? It's a world that's full of meaning. The world is heading somewhere. It has a goal. We have the visions of the Nevi'im that gifted the world with the concept that there's an end game to the whole thing. We were the ones who gave the world that concept. Otherwise, it's just, Olam Kimin Haganayik. And Klal Yisrael were the ones that brought this sense of fruit that the world can produce and we can do something together. When a Jew gets connected to Lashon HaKodesh be'emes, and again, not speaking Hebrew, I'm talking about living a life of Lashon HaKodesh in the way that we've described, then all the Lashonos of the Amim, they fall away. They're not, there's nothing there for us. In the Lashonos of the Amim, which the Rebbe is going to connect to the Ruach Sa'ara, which we learned about in Torah Ches, right? The Ruach Sa'ara of Esav, right? With the Bechin of Takaf Lefishan, it looks so powerful and enticing, and it's meaningless. It is completely fruitless. It gives us nothing. But a Jew can only feel that once they taste the R of Lashon HaKodesh. Sheyesh laha lashon shala'uma achizaboy, that each nation with its bad midas, we're going to learn in Torah Kuf Aleph, every nation has its own particular bad midas, reflected in the Gemara that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went to all the nations of the world and he said, would you like to receive the Torah? And each one responded with its negative midah. So each nation has its own thing, its own challenge. Klal Yisrael has all the bad midas, Klal Yisrael has all the challenges, because we reflect all the good and all the, not so good, so you can find everything in Klal Yisrael. But ultimately, each nation has its own unique thing. We can overcome all of those aspects of each and every one of the languages of the nations of the world through Lashon HaKodesh. Ve'ein lo shlita al Yisrael, and they will no longer have any power over Klal Yisrael. V'zebechinas, and this is a deeper aspect of Rashi that told us that Chava, which is Mamish, Deborah, emerged from Adam, which is Malchus, the Bechina of David HaMelech emerging from Tiferes, Yaakov Avinu, and Rashi had told us that there's some kind of etymological connection between Ish and Isha, because Isha derives from Ish, and Rashi said Lashon Neifel al Lashon. Says the Rebbe, you can take that very literally. Lashon, in the Lashonos of the Umas Ha'olam, Neifel al Lashon. They have their descent through Klal Yisrael connecting to our Lashon. Lashon, Neifel al Lashon. Like it says about Yaakov and Esav Mamish, Kishazakam Zen Neifel. Right, like we learned in Torah Aleph. When one rises, the other falls. Lashon, Neifel al Lashon. We have the capacity to overcome all of the nations of the world. And I just want to point out, because I didn't mention this when I was giving a little bit of a hakdama, which you're going to see is going to become very important in 2 minutes, and we're going to go a little bit over time today just to see a little bit more. But the aspect of kimi ish lukachazais is the way in which, if we see this world properly with the Lashon HaKodesh in it, we recognize that this whole world, Chava Malchus, emerged from Adam, which is Kutchabrichu. So that's why there's a specific mention of Lashon HaKodesh, Lashon Neifel al Lashon, where Rashi is pointing out the mechanics of Lashon HaKodesh, right? Because Isha comes from Ish in the context of Chava coming out from Adam, because that's what Lashon HaKodesh enables us to realize, that the world was communicated by Hashem. It itself is a manifested emanation from God Himself. Okay, so these two things are interconnected. So when a person is connecting to the world through the consciousness of Lashon HaKodesh, which is the consciousness of the tzaddik that we've been learning about all along, each lesson contributing a different energy within the general ruach of the tzaddik and the R of the tzaddik, and that way of living in the world and a way of tzaddik b'amanasa yichya, to really live with faith. When a person is living in such a world, which is enabling that person to approach the world as an Isha that emerged from the Ish, as Chava, Deborah that emerged from Adam, so the Memela, like Rashi from Chazal, on those very words, tells us Lashon Neifel Lashon. Memela will be able to overcome all of the seductions of the nations of the world, which are manifest in their language, which is no language, because the language is just Ruach. It's not Ruach of the Tzaddik, it's Ruach Sa'ara. It's just words that don't articulate the absolute ultimate truth about the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and how this thing is going to go and how this thing is going to end. Let's go a little bit further. V'hara koilel, says the Rebbe, if you want to know the Raha koilel, the collective evil, shekol hara shel shivim lashon klulim by, that each of the different aspects of the nations of the world and what they struggle with are all kolel in this, is dahainu tav eres hamadur shel tavis niyuf, is the torch, he calls it the burning, sparkling torch of Tavis Niyaf, of the desire for immorality, adultery, and all related sexual deviancy. This is the evil of all evils. This is the mamish, the ikra, the yitzar bishal arayin, the Zohar Kadosh says. The primary yitzhara is on arayis, more than anything else. No matter who you are, they say music is the language of the soul. There's another language. There's another universal language, and it's this one, right? And all of the nations of the world are stuck in this, each one in their own way. Through Lashon HaKodesh, through a Jew mamish reclaiming our Yiddishkeit, which means to see the world through Yiddish ha'ogen, through Yiddish eyes, and to approach the world with the realization of the letters and the meaning, and the realization that each one of us is a letter, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is communicating to us and through us. We are a communication of Hashem to the world. We have a reason to live. We want to live with meaning. We want to live with emunah. We want to live with productivity. We want to live with greatness. We want to live with tzidkus and so on. Through that, says the Rebbe, you can overcome Tavis Niyaf. Ma kesher Lashon HaKodesh, overcoming Tavis Niyaf. So go back to what I said a couple of minutes ago, now you understand a little bit, I was setting it up for this, is that Deborah is the aspect and the element of holy reproduction, right? Of holy zivug, where something holy is brought into the world because of that. The whole world is brought into being because of that, because of Lashon HaKodesh, which itself is, listen carefully because it's so hard to say, it's like, itself is Yichud Kutchabrichu Shchinte, which was Chava and Adam, which is Kutchabrichu, Tiferes, and Malchus, right? Which is Kol and Dibur. So every Lashon HaKodesh is a zivug. And it's a zivug that produces real peres, like a holy zivug between husband and wife, the way that it's supposed to be, can bring down neshamas in a healthy way, can raise them in a healthy way, can give them a healthy context. can fill them with healthy content, properly, husband and wife. Niyuf, even though it looks like a yichud, is the biggest period between Kodesh Baruch Hu and Shchinte. Because what's the inyan of niyuf? Niyuf means that I'm pushing God out of my life because I want a momentary pleasure for me personally. A, it's meaningless. B, it's negative Ratzon Hashem. C, it's completely out of line with why it was that you were created in the first place, which is to overcome, which is to self-sacrifice and to give up, what looks good to us in the moment, to inherit eternity, and so on and so forth. Niyuf. So there cannot be zivug there. So there's lashon, but it's garbled, meaningless gibberish. It's not true dibur. Because dibur is the birth. Dear friend of ours, David Weinberg, has a most gorgeous book. Aiden can tell you more about it, right? It's called The Birth of the Spoken Word. Highly recommended. Dibur is a birth. The question is, what's being born? Is it a stillborn, chas v'shalom? Is it a mamzer? Is it stam? What are we giving birth to? Words build, words destroy. The world is either built or destroyed based on how we talk. The world is either a world that has meaning or a world that's utterly meaningless, dependent on how we see the language with which the world was constructed. Is it just stam, meaningless, and sheker? Or is it vayomer lekimi hi'or, that the whole creation was leading up? That Bereshis bar lekim esher shmam and vayomer lekimi hi'or. If it's a hi'or, and we live with the realization that this whole world is dibur, that is the bechina of Chava, Malchus, that emerged from Adam, Tiferes, and I understand that this whole world is lashon, is dibur, that's kodesh, that's transmitting holiness, then we're a lot more likely to be able to lashon noifel al lashon, to be able to overcome the energies of the umas ha'olam, which are captured in their lashonas, which are the bechina of a language that is a bechina of niyuf. It's a zivug that's a non-zivug. It's a dibur that's a non-dibur. It's meaningless words. And it's not words that are full of gravity, gravitas, meaning. Words that compel us to really make something of ourselves, to really see our lives as a medium to communicate. Atem Eidainu Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you are my witnesses. You're supposed to do something in the world. You're supposed to find a way to reveal my presence in the world. Okay, all this is extraordinarily deep. We covered a lot. I know we didn't cover a lot of text, but I promise you it's necessary. You wouldn't want me to go faster. I'm telling you. Some of the chaver want me to go faster. You wouldn't understand the word of it. I'm telling you, I barely understand the word of it. And I don't think that we now understand it any better. But a little bit, at least, we have a little bit of an inkling of ma kesher, right? Between niyuf and lashon HaKodesh, lashon nafla, lashon Chava, Adam, the creation of the world with dibur, and all this going back to a person becoming a real tzaddik, where their face is so holy and shining that just by a person encountering us, without us needing to say a word, our face is communicative, right? The birth of the spoken word is, even when we don't speak, and they're able to feel hisaurus, to come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless us, B'ezras Hashem, to contemplate these things, get this clear, and we will carry on tomorrow morning. V'siyamta D'Shmaya. Yes, one lashon.
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני